Let's head overseas now, and the US President Barack Obama is warning North Korea that its isolation will only deepen if it goes ahead with a planned rocket launch next month. Mr. Obama was speaking in Seoul with South Korean President Lee Myung-bak ahead of global nuclear security talks. Christopher Hill is the former United States ambassador to Korea, and he also led America's delegation at the six-party talks process. He now works for the University of Denver, and from where he joins us now via webcam. Christopher Hill, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Pleasure.
Firstly, in your view, just how provocative is that planned missile launch by the North Koreans?
Well, it's pretty provocative in the sense that there were long-standing negotiations. These went on for several months, and basically it was nukes for food. There was an agreement that they would halt all tests, they would allow the inspectors back in, and in return the U.S. would take a really tough look at seeing if we could provide them food. And so just barely weeks after the agreement, the North Koreans announced that they were going to go ahead with a so-called space launch. So I think it's a pretty serious problem. And I think China is kind of in the hot seat because they're the ones who kind of pushed and pushed to see that this deal was made.
In fact, President Obama, speaking with the South Korean leader, as you know, Christopher Hill, used very strong words regarding China. Once again, he urged them to rein in its North Korean ally. What are the prospects of that happening?
Well, first of all, I don't want to exaggerate the fact that we are in an election year in the United States, but let me make that point. We're in an election year, so bashing China is kind of fair game at this time. But I think more seriously, China needs to understand that when they take the leadership of the six-party process, when they tell us that they think there's a deal here, when they go to Pyongyang several times and really push for it, and then it doesn't happen, they have a responsibility to kind of put this thing back together. So I think the president is appropriately putting the onus on them, and we'll have to see what they do. Of course, China right now it's not quite an election year, but it's certainly a year of transition for them, and so they haven't really kind of stretched themselves on issues like this.
President Obama also made what many are describing as a very interesting comment in that media conference, in that he said it wasn't quite clear just who was calling the shots in North Korea, whether it was Kim Jong-un or one of the generals in the back rooms. Is there some doubt in the administration, in US policy circles, about just who is running the show there?
I think it's fair enough that there's a concern about the unity of command. Usually when they've done these kinds of provocative things, it's been in the context of a broken down negotiating process, and they are sort of trying to make a point. In this case, the process was going forward. In fact, we had people heading there to talk about what would be the monitoring requirements of food aid. So all systems were going forward, and then suddenly they come up with this. So one does have the impression that the people who were negotiating on the food aid were not the people planning a missile launch, and that does bring into question the issue of this unity of command.
We're about to go into this nuclear terrorism summit. At the first one of these back in 2010, President Obama said it was his aim to secure all nuclear materials worldwide by 2014. How achievable is that now that we're 2 years down the track from that promise?
Well, I think there's been a lot of progress in terms of countries working together on securing fissile material. I mean, there are issues such as North Korea and Iran, and when you have a summit just some 50 kilometers from North Korea, it's understandable why the focus would be on North Korea. But I think in terms of getting major countries to get together to figure out systems for preventing the unlawful transfer of this technology, I think they've actually made some progress on that.
Christopher Hill, thank you very much for your time this morning.
My pleasure.